kettle clicked off with a soft, tired sigh. I wrapped both hands around my favorite mug, the chipped blue one I got at the antique store on 3rd, and carried it slowly back to the chair by the window. Outside, Spokane's early winter pressed against the glass like a hand, fogging up the corners, trying to sneak in through the cracked frame. The sky was that dull, steel gray that made it feel like snow was trying to fall but hadn't made up its mind yet. I sat back, pulling the wool blanket tighter over my legs, the fabric scratchy but familiar. One hand on the warm mug, the other flipping slowly through an old poetry journal I'd picked up for $2 at a thrift store near the river. A line I'd underlined earlier kept tugging at the edge of my mind. What we give away becomes the weight we carry. I didn't know if that was true, but it felt like it could be. The apartment was quiet. Just the faint hum of the space heater across the room, the ticking of the clock in the kitchen, and my own breath. That kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, just unoccupied. I liked it most days. It reminded me I didn't owe anyone my noise. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't move. Just glanced toward it, resting face up on the table beside the mug. The screen lit up with a name I'd seen 1,000 times but still made my stomach tighten in the worst kind of way. Dad. I stared at it for a moment too long before I finally tapped speaker. Claire, he said, voice calm, almost too light, like he was calling to ask if I could grab eggs on my way over. Hey, kid. Hey, I said quietly. There was a pause on his end, long enough to mean something. You don't need to come home for Thanksgiving this year. I blinked, one hand tightening slightly around the mug. The words didn't sound real at first. I thought maybe I'd misheard him. But I hadn't. I'm sorry, what? He exhaled. Your mom and I just think it's probably better if you stayed put this time. Julia's been kind of on edge. You know how she gets. We're just trying to keep things peaceful. I set the mug down on the table. The sound of ceramic on wood echoed louder than it should have. Julia again, I said, though it wasn't a question. So what you're saying is I'm not invited? Because Julia gets on edge? My voice was steady. Too steady. That dangerous kind of calm that only comes when you've already snapped inside but haven't decided how much of yourself to show. Don't make this a big deal, Claire, he said, that sigh slipping into his voice. The one I'd heard since I was 12. The one that always meant don't push this any further. It's just one day. You'll be fine. I stood slowly. The chair creaked behind me like it wanted to protest but knew better. My fingers curled around the edge of the table, pressing into the grain. Just one day, I repeated, voice colder now. You say that after I've sent over $4,200 this year alone to keep that house from freezing? There was nothing on the other end. Just the soft hum of the call and the distance that had never felt wider. Don't bring money into this, he said finally, and his voice sounded a little less sure than before. You offered to help. I let out a dry laugh. The kind that doesn't come from humor. Just history. Yeah. I offered. In January, when you called at midnight and said the furnace had stopped and the pipes were close to bursting. In March, when Mom said it was making noises again. In October, when Julia blew half her savings on those linen pillows no one bought and you needed help with the oil bill. Till silence. I paid it all. Quietly. Without complaint. I never asked for anything. And now you're telling me I'm too much of a disruption to sit at the table? Family is family, Claire, he said. But Julia's had a rough year. She needs some calm. Side the window, snow had started to fall. Kind that drifts slowly, not in a rush to get anywhere. I watched a few flakes settle on the fire escape railing, so soft they looked like dust. I've had a rough year too, I said, softer now. But no one ever rearranged a dinner for me. He stayed quiet. I knew that silence. I'd heard it 100 times. That sigh that wasn't really a sigh. That pause that meant let's just move on. That quiet way of telling me I was being too sensitive. Again. Don't make this awkward, he added. It's not personal. I exhaled slow, long. Then don't expect another dime from me this winter, I said finally. If I'm not part of the family, don't treat me like an account. And before he could say anything else, I hit the red button. The screen went dark. My eyes didn't. Not yet. Sighed, the snow kept falling. Thin, soft, silent. But not quieter than the room I was standing in. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in the blanket. My hands were clenched together in my lap, not from anger, not exactly. From the ache of realizing something I probably already knew but hadn't let myself feel until that moment. I looked toward the shelf. A photo leaned against a stack of books, me and my parents, Thanksgiving 2018. Julia in the corner, laughing at something probably only funny to her. I remembered that day too well. I caught a bus from Spokane to Cheney right after a 10-hour shift. Still managed to peel the potatoes, roast the green beans, and sit down in time for Mom's toast. I stood up, walked to the desk, and opened my laptop. Cold crept in through the windows as the wind picked up, rattling the corners of the pane. The electric heater clicked once, then kept humming. I logged into the heating account. The one I had created when Mom cried last year and said they couldn't keep the house warm past November. Every payment stared back at me. Every dollar. Every sacrifice. Every month I skipped groceries so they wouldn't freeze. The last transfer had been in early October. $400. I hovered the cursor over manage payments. My hand didn't shake. Click. A new page opened. Cancel automatic payments? Click. A message popped up. Are you sure? Service will end on November 3rd. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I clicked confirm. I closed the laptop, the screen snapping shut with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. The heater in the corner still buzzed, low and steady, the only sound besides the wind picking up outside. I stood there for a moment, fingers still resting on the lid of the laptop, like they hadn't quite caught up with the decision I just made. But there was no regret. Not yet. Just the strange, quiet feeling that comes when you finally do something you've been carrying inside for far too long. I walked over to the window and pressed my palm against the cold glass. Snow was falling more heavily now, those thick, drifting flakes that take their time on the way down. The sidewalk below was already dusted in white. My boots were by the door, still wet from this morning's shift, and I thought about putting them on just to step outside for air. But I didn't move. Instead, I looked around the apartment. Small, cramped, older than I would have liked. But mine. Every piece of it earned from the 7-to-3 warehouse shifts that left my arms sore and my back tight. Every lamp, every blanket, every bowl in the cupboard, paid for, not borrowed. Not gifted. Mine. I sat back down in the chair and picked up my tea. It was lukewarm now, but I drank it anyway. Bitterness and all. Some things don't get sweeter just because you wish they would. Across the room, the bookshelf sat half full. Most of them used. A few borrowed. A few saved from high school. On the top shelf, tucked between an old candle and a folded scarf, sat a manila folder. I pulled it down and opened it on the table, flipping through the pages. A printed spreadsheet. Nothing fancy. Just lines and dates and notes in pencil. I'd started keeping track of payments last January after I realized I'd forgotten how much I had already sent. I didn't want to forget again. Each line read like a silent journal. January 11th, $300, emergency heating oil, pipe burst scare. March 4th, $175, furnace repair, called in technician. May 20th, $250, balance from April missed payment. October 3rd, $400, ahead of winter again. There were dozens more. In total, just over $4,200 since January. And that was just this year. I tapped the pencil once against the paper, then set it down. The folder didn't weigh much, but it felt heavy as hell. I leaned back in the chair and let the silence settle around me again. I thought about Julia, about the way she could make a mess out of anything and still walk away with everyone rushing to her defense. I remembered when she convinced Dad to co-sign a loan for her boutique pillow startup. All natural linen, ethically sourced, she'd said, like that excused the fact that she ordered 500 units from a mass distributor in Oregon and barely sold 50. The rest of the inventory ended up boxed in the garage, next to the broken treadmill and the boxes of old VHS tapes no one ever bothered to throw out. Dad just shook his head and said, "She's figuring things out." Mom had nodded and said, "She's young. Mistakes happen." And I had wired money to help cover the heating bill they couldn't pay because Julia had spent what little was left. That was the pattern. Every mistake she made came with an understanding shrug. Every time I needed something, there was hesitation. A sigh. Quiet implied burden. But I helped anyway. 'Cause I thought that was what you did. That's what they taught me. You don't turn your back on family, even if you're the only one standing upright while everyone else leans on you. It was almost evening by the time I noticed the light had changed. The sky outside was dipped in that heavy blue that comes just before full dark, and the corners of the apartment were cloaked in a soft gray. I got up and turned on the lamp by the couch. The warm yellow glow spread slowly across the room. I liked this time of day, when the city outside got quieter, and I could almost believe I was the only one in it. My phone buzzed once on the table. I glanced over. Julia. The message preview lit up beneath her name. "Glad you're skipping this year. Honestly, it'll be way less tense without you." I didn't open it. Didn't need to. I just stared at the screen until it went dark again. The worst part wasn't the message. It was how unsurprised I felt reading it, as if it was already written in the back of my mind before she sent it. I didn't even feel the urge to reply. I just placed the phone face down and walked to the stove. Dinner was quiet, just a bowl of vegetable stew I'd made the night before, reheated until it bubbled gently. I sat at the kitchen counter and ate slowly, letting the warmth settle deep in my chest. My phone buzzed again, then again. I didn't look. Instead, I picked up the book I'd left near the stove, a paperback novel with cracked edges and a coffee ring on the back cover. I'd found it at a yard sale in late September for $1. The story wasn't anything extraordinary, but the main character had left her family at 35 and moved into a cabin in Oregon to start over. The kind of story that used to feel impossible to me. Now it felt like a memory I hadn't made yet. As I read, the buzz of the phone started to fade into the background. It wasn't just the house I had stepped away from. It was the version of me that had always believed they'd come around. Later that night, I lit a small candle and sat cross-legged on the floor by the window. The snow had thickened outside, a blanket of white softening the edges of the city. No plows yet, no tire tracks. Just silence. A kind of hush that felt earned. I watched the snow fall for a long time. My tea was gone. The heater still hummed. My hands rested in my lap, steady for the first time in days. There was a knock in the hallway. A neighbor, maybe. A delivery. But I didn't move to check. It wasn't for me. Nothing urgent ever knocked gently. My phone buzzed once more, a final flicker. I reached for it without thinking. "Mom." "Claire, just making sure you're okay. Julia's a little stressed, but she didn't mean anything. We'll miss you. Maybe Christmas." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I powered the phone off completely. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because of my shift. I didn't work weekends anymore, not since I negotiated my hours back in June. But still, my eyes opened before the alarm, just as the first sliver of cold light pushed through the window. The air in the apartment was frigid, the kind of cold that clung to your fingers and made you curl deeper into the blanket. But I didn't move right away. I stayed under the covers, letting the silence spread across the ceiling like slow frost. There was no heater kicking on in a distant hallway. No scent of coffee drifting down from another room. No footsteps pacing the floors above mine. Just me. My breath. Quiet. I got up eventually, pulled on my thick socks and the old sweatshirt with the sleeves fraying at the cuffs. I turned on the kettle and stood near the window while it boiled. Outside, the snow was still falling. Not heavy, but steady, enough to blur the outlines of the parked cars and the street signs. I could hear the wind faintly against the side of the building, like it was dragging cold fingers across the brick. My phone stayed off. I didn't need to check it. I already knew what would be there. Apologies that weren't really apologies, explanations that would circle around Julia like a protective fence, and maybe one or two vague attempts at guilt dressed up as concern. I didn't need any of it. Instead, I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, ate a bowl of oats with cinnamon and honey, and read the last 3 poems in the thrifted journal I'd been flipping through all week. The final one hit me harder than I expected. You cannot build a home where you are always an afterthought. I stared at the line for a long time, read it twice, then a third time. I closed the book and let the silence wash over me again. Later that afternoon, I bundled up and walked to the corner market. The sidewalks were slick and mostly empty. The snow had started sticking now, turning the intersections into a quiet mess of slush and ice. No one in Spokane really wanted to be out that day, and I liked that. Fewer people meant fewer eyes, fewer conversations. Just the snow crunching beneath my boots and the wind pushing against my scarf. I picked up lentils, carrots, garlic, and a loaf of bread that was still warm in its paper wrapping. Simple things. Enough for a soup I could stretch for the next 3 days. When I got home, I kicked off my boots by the door and let the apartment swallow me whole again. Still warm. Still mine. I started chopping vegetables and turned on the small radio in the kitchen. Jazz, something slow and wandering, filled the apartment like steam from a boiling pot, soft, hazy, familiar. Halfway through stirring the pot, I reached for my phone without thinking. Habit, maybe. It was still off. And when I remembered that, I didn't feel panic. I felt relief. I set it back down and went back to the soup. That night, the dreams started coming back. Not nightmares exactly. Just old memories dressed in the clothes of sleep. I saw our old kitchen in Cheney, the one with the tile floor that always felt cold no matter how high we turned up the heat. Mom standing by the stove, dicing onions in silence. Dad flipping through the morning paper. Julia dancing in with her music too loud, knocking into the table, laughing at something only she understood. And me, just sitting at the table trying to be small, trying to be helpful, trying to matter without taking up too much space. In the dream, the windows were wide open. Cold air rushed in, rattling the dishes and the cupboard doors, but no one seemed to notice. They kept talking, laughing, living. I was the only one shivering. When I woke up, the blanket had slipped off my shoulders. I pulled it back around me and curled tighter. The sky outside was still dark. 3 days passed like that. Quiet mornings. Tea and toast. A few shifts at the warehouse. Kind of work that kept my hands busy and my body sore in a way I could control. I didn't check in with anyone. Bree texted once, just a little snowflake emoji and a thinking of you. I smiled when I saw it. I almost replied. Then decided not to. Not because I didn't want to. Just because I wanted to let the silence breathe a little longer. On the 3rd evening, I checked my mailbox and found a folded note inside. Not an envelope. Just a page, creased in thirds, written in the familiar cursive I'd seen on every birthday card since I was a kid. Claire, I know you're hurt. I wish I'd said more when your father made that call. I didn't want things to be tense. I just wanted peace. But I see now I was quiet at your expense. I let you carry too much and still left you out when it mattered. We'll miss you at Thanksgiving. I hope you're warm. Love, Mom. I read the note 3 times, then folded it back, slid it into the side of the cookbook on my shelf, and walked away. On Thanksgiving morning, I made coffee just after sunrise. The light was pale and slow, slipping through the curtains like it was reluctant to wake the room. The snow was thick on the window ledge. Everything outside looked like a photograph. I made toast, spread it with peanut butter, and peeled a small clementine. Simple. Nothing performative. No turkey. No green beans. No mashed potatoes in porcelain dishes passed around a table full of eggshell tension. Just me. Quiet breakfast. A soft jazz record spinning on the player. The heater humming, faithful and small. 10, someone knocked. Not the mailman. Not the neighbor from downstairs who always forgot her keys. The knock was too measured, too familiar. I knew before I even reached the peephole. Dad. I didn't open the door right away. Just stood there, bare feet on the hardwood, hand resting on the knob. Through the peephole I could see him, Roy. My father. Bundled in that old gray coat he wore when shoveling the driveway, scarf loose around his neck, the knit cap Mom made for him a few Christmases ago tugged low over his ears. He was flushed from the cold, breathing hard, his shoulders hunched up to brace against the wind. He didn't knock again. Just stood there, shifting from foot to foot. I cracked the door open. Warm air spilled out instantly, brushing his weather-chapped face like an unspoken reminder. "Claire," he said, voice rough, eyes scanning my face quickly like he didn't know where to land. "We need to talk." I didn't step back. Didn't open the door wider. I just leaned against the frame, still holding it with one hand. He looked older than the last time I saw him. More fragile around the mouth. But I didn't let myself soften. "Now's not a great time," I said evenly. "You cut the heat," he said, skipping past small talk. "The house is freezing. Your mom's sick. Julia's locked herself in her room. It's 38 degrees in there." I didn't flinch. Not visibly. "I didn't cut anything," I said. "I just stopped paying." His jaw twitched. He adjusted the scarf at his neck like he was trying to buy a few seconds. "You know we're not good with tech. Contract was under your name. They didn't even notify us when you canceled it." "I know," I said. "Because I handled everything. For 2 winters. I called. I scheduled deliveries. I paid. Without asking for thanks or acknowledgement or even space at the dinner table." He didn't say anything. The silence between us was familiar now. Not empty. Just full of all the things he refused to name. "I never said you weren't invited," he muttered. "You didn't have to," I said, my voice low but steady. "You said Julia was tense. That I should stay back. That it was just one day. And that was enough." He looked past me for a moment, into the apartment, the soft lighting, the neatly folded blanket on the couch, the mug of coffee cooling on the table. "You're punishing us over a misunderstanding," he said, not harsh, just tired. Over one moment of poor wording. I opened the door an inch wider. Not to invite him in, just so he could feel the contrast. The warmth I had built for myself. The life that asked nothing of him. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's consequence." He blinked like he hadn't expected that word. "We have no money, Claire," he said quietly. "We've sold almost everything worth selling. I called the oil company, but we can't cover the upfront cost. Your mom, she's not doing well." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I meant it. I did. But I didn't offer anything more. His hands were buried in his coat pockets. I could see his breath now, quick and uneven. Not from exertion. From frustration. "You're still part of this family," he said, eyes sharper now. "Act like it." I took a breath, slow and deep. My fingers pressed into the wood of the doorframe. "No," I said. "You made it clear what my role was. Pay the bills. Don't take up too much space. And stay quiet when Julia needs the attention. That's not true. It is, I said. You just didn't say it out loud. He didn't argue. Not really. He just stared at me like he couldn't quite recognize the woman in front of him. Maybe because for once I wasn't the one trying to make things easier. You used to be the reliable one, he said, voice flat. Now you're just cold. I smiled. Not with bitterness. Just with clarity. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just finally stopped shivering so the rest of you could feel how cold it really is. He stepped back, like the words had hit him in a way he wasn't ready for. I didn't slam the door. I just closed it. Quietly. Slowly. With the finality of someone who knew she wouldn't be opening it again anytime soon. Click of the lock echoed through the apartment like a full stop. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Inside, it was warm. I walked back to the couch, pulled the blanket around my shoulders, and sat down with my coffee. Still warm. Still mine. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder if he would call again. I didn't rehearse comebacks or regret anything I'd said. Instead, I stared out at the snow-covered street, the empty sidewalk, the world made soft by cold. And I felt something settle deep inside me. Not peace exactly, but the space where peace might finally grow. The silence lasted 3 days. 3 full days without a call, without a knock, without a single ping lighting up the dark face of my phone. Sat on the table near the window, off and unmoving, like a closed door I had no desire to open. Those 3 days felt heavier than most. But not in a bad way. Heavy like a thick quilt pulled over you during a storm, suffocating if you focused on it too much, comforting if you let yourself sink into it. I got up with the sun each morning, even when I didn't have to. Made tea, opened the curtains to watch the snow fall, wrapped myself in the gray blanket from the couch, and sat cross-legged on the floor with my book. It was a rhythm. A soft, slow rhythm. The kind of pace I hadn't known I was allowed to keep. The work at the distribution center had slowed down. Pre-holiday shipping madness hadn't started yet, and I wasn't scrambling for hours the way I had been last winter. I had just enough shifts to keep the bills paid and my pantry stocked. And that was enough. For now, that was more than enough. I read more. Cooked more. Thought less. That was the part one didn't expect, the stillness in my own head. After years of keeping track of their bills, their heating oil schedules, Julia's emotional weather reports, there was space now. Empty shelves in my mind where panic used to sit. Until the messages started. On the 4th morning, I turned my phone back on, not because I was ready, but because I wanted to check the weather report. Tan had dipped into the teens overnight, and I could feel the difference even under my thick socks. My little space heater was doing its best, but the apartment still breathed like an old man in winter, uneven, wheezing through the cracks in the windows. The screen lit up with 32 notifications. I didn't open them right away. Just stared at the numbers. Red bubbles. White text. The tiny, pulsing urgency of other people's needs. I scrolled through them slowly, my thumb moving like it was dragging something underwater. The first was from Mom. Claire, the heating system seems off again. Can you check when you get a chance? Then another. It's getting colder. House feels like it's losing heat too fast. Then Julia. Are you kidding me? It's freezing and you didn't even say anything? Classic. Just ghost everyone and expect us to figure it out. Whatever. You never really liked being around us anyway. And finally, Dad. Claire. Call me. Something's wrong with the furnace. This isn't a joke. I know you're getting these. Why are you doing this? Each message was a scratch on a window I had just cleaned. I read them once, slowly, then again a bit faster. I didn't reply. I didn't delete them either. I just placed the phone back on the table and poured myself another cup of tea. The soup I'd made the night before was still warm on the stove, lentils and carrots thickening overnight into something more solid, more satisfying. I sat down and ate slowly. Sighed, snow began to fall again, thick and steady this time. And I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel triumphant either. I just felt still. That afternoon I walked to the bookstore down the block. Not the chain one with sterile rows and overpriced bookmarks, the used one tucked between the bakery and the antique shop. The owner, Joe, knew me by now. He nodded when I came in and pointed to a fresh stack by the window. Some new donations came in. A little poetry. A lot of heartbreak. Perfect, I said. I browsed for a while, letting my fingers trail across spines. Books with cracked covers, underlined sentences, forgotten receipts tucked between pages like fossils. I picked one, Women Who Walked Away, not because of the title but because someone had scribbled in the margins in pencil. This is when she begins to breathe. I bought it for $2.75 and left without saying much more. The bakery next door smelled like cinnamon and brown butter. I stood outside the glass for a moment, watching people sip coffee inside. Couples with wool scarves and foggy glasses. A woman with her laptop, typing furiously between bites of a scone. It looked warm in there. Safe. But I didn't go in. Not today. By the end of the week, the messages changed tone. Less confused, more urgent. From Mom. It's 54 degrees in the house. Your dad won't wear his heavier coat. Julia's been coughing. Please call me. I know things are complicated, but can you just call the company and see what's going on? From Dad. Claire. This is serious now. We sold a few things to try and make the payment, but they want a contract, not a one-time. We're in trouble here. This is family. And from Julia. Fine. Just pretend you're not part of this family anymore. Go ahead. Hope it makes you feel powerful. I read them all in one sitting, then powered off my phone again. Not because I was trying to be cruel, but because I didn't want the guilt to sneak back in through the back door. That voice that always said you're the stable one, the strong one, the helper. That voice never once asked, what do you need? The cold got worse that weekend. News reports warned about sudden dips in temperature, wind chills dropping into the negatives at night. Some parts of town lost power briefly. Others lined up at the gas station for backup generators. I stayed inside, lit a candle, wrapped myself in 2 blankets, ate roasted squash with garlic and lemon, read half of the new book before bed, slept soundly. On Monday, I got a voicemail from Dad. I didn't answer the call, but I listened. His voice was hoarse, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. Claire, we're at 50 degrees inside. The furnace doesn't respond anymore. Your mom keeps wrapping up in every blanket she can find. Julia hasn't come out of her room. It's getting dangerous. There was a long pause. I don't know why you're doing this, but please, just call me. He sounded like a man who had finally realized something he couldn't fix on his own. I stared at the wall for a while after the message ended. Not at anything in particular. Just through it. That night, I made grilled cheese and tomato soup. I curled up by the heater and opened a photo album I hadn't touched in years. The one with the felt cover and the little clasp that always stuck. Inside, birthdays, summer road trips, one blurry shot of me and Julia in matching Christmas pajamas. I looked young in all of them. Not just because I was, but because I hadn't yet learned what it meant to be exhausted by love. I closed the album and put it back. I didn't cry. Tuesday morning, a call came in from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Hi, is this Miss Claire Reynolds? Yes. This is Lori from Northern Heating Solutions. I'm calling regarding the house at 219 Appleton Lane. We haven't been able to reach the homeowners. The previous heating oil contract was under your name. I waited. Are you planning to renew service for the winter? she asked, her voice gentle, maybe even hopeful. I looked out the window. A fresh layer of snow had fallen during the night. The world outside looked like a postcard. No, I said. I'm not renewing this service. I'm no longer responsible for that house. There was a pause. Okay. So just to confirm. That's correct, I said. Please remove my name from any future contact. She thanked me. I hung up. And that was that. The messages didn't stop, but they slowed. They got shorter, tighter, more clipped. From Mom. It's 46 now. Your dad is coughing constantly. Julia won't go to the clinic. My hands are too numb to do dishes. From Julia. You're unbelievable. We could have frozen. You chose this. From Dad. I don't understand you anymore. And finally, don't bother coming back. I read that last one and let out a long breath. Not sharp. Not sad. Just tired. Then I turned on my radio. Made lemon tea. Read another chapter. Sat with myself. Till. Warm. Free. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke to sunshine. Bright and sharp through the window, bouncing off the snow-covered roofs, catching the icicles that had started to grow along the fire escape railing. The city was quiet. No cars. No footsteps. Just the sound of the heater clicking on and the kettle beginning to boil. I made toast. Sliced a pear. Brewed strong black tea with honey. I didn't cook anything special. Didn't play festive music. Didn't scroll through anyone's feed to see what they were doing. For once, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I didn't need to guess who it was. The doorbell rang once. Then silence. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. Kettle was still hissing gently on the stove, and the faint scent of cardamom was just beginning to rise from the steeping tea. I took my time pouring it, added a splash of oat milk, stirred once, and set the mug down beside the lamp. Then I walked to the door. Through the peephole I saw him. Same gray coat. Same scarf. This time no hat. His hair was thinning more than I remembered. Snow clung to his shoulders like dust. He didn't look up at the door, just stood there, shifting from one foot to the other like he wasn't sure whether to knock again or turn around and leave. I opened the door just a crack. The warmth from inside spilled out immediately, wrapping around the hallway like a ribbon. I could see the contrast hit him, the way his shoulders relaxed just a little, the way his face lifted toward it without even meaning to. "Claire," Dad said, voice low, rough around the edges. I didn't say anything. "I know it's Thanksgiving," he said. "But I thought maybe." He trailed off, eyes flicking toward my socks, the blanket on the couch behind me, the mug on the table still steaming. "I just thought maybe you'd let me talk." I leaned against the door frame, still not opening it any wider. "You're talking." He gave a weak nod. "We're not doing great. Your mom's sick. Not hospital sick, but coughing. She's got chills all the time. Julia's been well. Julia. She's staying with a friend now, said she needed space." I waited. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's down to 38 degrees in the house. We've been using those old plug-in heaters. Blankets. I even tried to hang some towels near the doors. It's not enough." "That's what it's like when you can't afford heat," I said. "I know. I've lived it." He flinched, and I wasn't sure if it was from my voice or the wind curling down the hallway behind him. "We've sold what we could," he went on. "I sold Dad's watch collection. The one he left me. Got just enough to buy a few gallons of oil. But it's not gonna last more than a week." There was something in his face then, not desperation exactly, but something closer to being cornered. Not by me. By himself. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You told me to stay back. For Julia's comfort. You made that decision. So why come now? He took a long breath. Because, he said, I thought it would be one day. I thought we could smooth things over after. That you'd understand. I do understand, I said. Too well. His face hardened slightly, but he didn't argue. Just stood there in the cold, letting the silence thicken between us. You made everything easier for us for years, he said finally. That's the truth. I didn't see it clearly until now. Not really. But you held a lot together. I raised an eyebrow. And yet, the moment someone else was uncomfortable, I was the one asked to disappear. It wasn't about you, he said quickly. Julia. I held up a hand. Don't. He stopped mid-sentence. I'm not doing this again, I said. I'm not standing here while you justify throwing me out of the room to spare Julia's feelings. I didn't make a mess of my life and expect others to clean it up. I didn't siphon your savings on vanity projects. I didn't ask for praise. I just helped. Quietly. Consistently. And you repaid me by asking me to stay away. That was the moment you told me where I stood. His mouth opened, but there was no comeback. Just air, thick with cold and the weight of years. We didn't mean to, he started. But you did, I cut in gently. Maybe not with malice, but with carelessness. And sometimes that hurts more. The wind rattled the old windows down the hall. He looked smaller now. Not because of the coat or the snow or his age. Just because of the space I'd finally created between us. A space he couldn't fill with guilt or need. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. Not anymore. I'm just done. He looked past me again, toward the soft light in the apartment, the warmth, the quiet. Then back at me. You're really not coming back, he said. No, I said. And you shouldn't ask me to. There was a pause. I don't know how to fix this. You can't, I replied. Because I'm not broken. I just walked away. He took one step back, then another. Like he understood something now, but too late for it to matter. I hope you stay warm, I said before closing the door. He nodded, almost like a bow, and walked down the hallway, his footsteps soft against the carpet. I closed the door behind him. The lock clicked with quiet finality, and I exhaled. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. Not because anything had been resolved, but because I had nothing left to fix. No apology to hope for. No guilt to carry. Just a long exhale and the hum of the heater beside me. The next morning, I made pancakes and topped them with honey and slices of apple. I ate slowly, watching the snow outside swirl in soft loops down the alley. No calls came. No new messages. Just stillness. Later that day, Bree called. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. Hey, I said. You okay? Yeah. Actually, I think I am. There was a pause. Your dad came by? I nodded. Then remembered she couldn't see me. Yeah. He showed up. Said the house is freezing. Said Julia left. Bree made a soft noise in her throat. Julia's been staying with a friend of mine in Liberty Lake. Well, not anymore. She wore out her welcome in 4 days. Took over the living room. Broke a teacup and didn't even apologize. I smirked into my mug. Sounds familiar. She posted some dramatic story online, Bree continued. About being abandoned. Said her family left her to suffer while they all basked in luxury. I almost choked on my popcorn. She really thinks that, I said quietly. That she's the victim. She has to, Bree replied. Otherwise, she'd have to face herself. We talked a little longer. She filled me in on our cousin Mark trying to offload his old SUV for quick cash. Aunt Rachel downsizing. Family cracks showing all over like thawing ice. But none of it pierced me anymore. None of it felt like mine to hold. "You're different," Bree said eventually. "Stronger. Calmer." "I stopped reaching for the rope they kept pulling out of my hands," I said. "Turns out peace starts when you let go." She was quiet a moment, then said, "If you ever want to spend a weekend out here, my couch is better company." I smiled. "Thanks, Bree. I might take you up on that." A week passed. Then 2. No calls. No apologies. No sudden explanations or efforts to rebuild. I saw Julia's face once more. A blurry Instagram story, vague and melancholy, her draped in 3 scarves indoors, captioned with, "Sometimes your own blood is the coldest thing in the room." I didn't respond. Didn't even flinch. Instead, I folded laundry, watered my plant, tried a new soup recipe I found in the back of a 1992 cookbook someone had donated to the used bookstore. Outside, the snow deepened. Temperatures dropped to single digits at night. The furnace at the old house I knew wouldn't hold up. Even with the stopgap oil they'd scraped together, it would sputter eventually. They were likely layering socks and eating canned soup by candlelight. But that wasn't mine anymore. In the quiet of early December, I began sleeping with the window cracked. Not much. Just a sliver. Just enough to let in the bite of winter and remind myself that I was safe from it now. That I had chosen warmth, not the kind that comes from thermostats, but the kind you build in solitude. In boundaries. In truth. I wrote in a journal most nights. Nothing elaborate. Just a sentence or two. I am no longer the emergency contact for a house that only remembers me in crisis. I am not a villain for choosing to live. I am allowed to stop explaining. On December 12th, I lit a candle in the evening, curled up on the couch, and opened the book I'd bought the day after everything changed. Women Who Walked Away. There was a line I hadn't noticed before. Some doors don't slam. They close quietly, softly, and the silence they leave behind is the most honest sound you'll ever hear. I closed the book and looked around the apartment, my blanket draped over the armrest, my tea mug sitting half full, the lamp casting a soft glow against the cracked walls. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I hadn't escaped winter, but I'd stopped pretending I had to freeze for someone else to feel warm. January arrived like a whispered apology. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just cold and soft and late. The city had already frozen over by the time the new year slipped onto the calendar. Pecan, in its usual way, was blanketed in white and silence. Kind of stillness that almost dared you to remember. But I didn't. Not the way I used to. There were no calls. No messages. No sudden declarations of forgiveness or reconnection. Mom didn't send her usual Happy New Year party popper confetti ball message with the glittery gif attached. No quiet apology wrapped in celebration. Nothing from Julia. Not a sarcastic remark, not a plea, not even a veiled insult pretending to be concern. Just space. Real, empty, uninterrupted space. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to fill it. The days took on a rhythm of their own. I woke early. Not because I had to, but because I liked the hush of morning. I liked the sound of the space heater clicking on, kettle starting to hiss, the way the light crept across the wood floor like it had nowhere else to be. I worked my shifts, came home tired, but in a way that made sense. Physical tired. Earned tired. Not the kind that weighed on my chest because I was carrying things I hadn't asked for. I learned how to roast squash without burning the edges. Found an old playlist of jazz and 60s soul I hadn't listened to in years. Started reading again without feeling like it was an indulgence. I even pulled out my knitting kit from a box I'd tucked away during one of the early moves. Started a scarf in deep rust red. I told myself it was for winter, but I knew it was more than that. It was for me. To prove I could still make something warm. A few weeks into January, Bree called again. Her voice, as always, rang with both warmth and exasperation. "You won't believe this," she said. I smiled into the phone. "I probably will." Julia posted another video. She's crying. Full breakdown. Said she was betrayed by everyone in her life and had to sleep in a car for a night. I sat on the couch, one leg tucked under me. Which car? Her friend's ex's, apparently. She's telling the internet that you abandoned her and left your parents to freeze. I didn't sigh. I didn't fume. I just let the words pass through me like steam rising from a mug. She leave out the part where I kept them warm for 2 winters straight? I asked softly. Bree laughed. Conveniently. She said something like, "Some people pretend to be generous until they're no longer praised for it." She's spinning it like you were only helping to look good. "She's telling the story she needs to survive," I said. "Yeah, but it's a bad one. And kind of boring. Like a sad rerun." I chuckled. Let her talk. I don't have to prove anything. Bree was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "I hope you know I'm proud of you." My throat tightened just a little. "Thank you." "Promise me something," she said. "When this all dies down, and it will, you don't let them write their version of you in your absence." I paused. "I'm not absent," I said. "I'm just not performing." "Good," she said. "Hold that." After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the steam curling out of my mug. Outside, the snow had begun again. Thick flakes now. Not the hesitant kind from early winter. These were certain. Confident. They felt like they had every right to be here. I watched them for a while. Then I opened my laptop. Not to check messages. Not to peek at social media. Just to open a blank document. I didn't know what I was writing. But the words came anyway. I am not the villain in someone else's story. I am not the cold wind that made you shiver. I was the blanket you ignored. The fire you took for granted. And I have stopped burning for those who call the light too bright. I stared at the words, then hit save. Titled the file January. Midway through the month, I passed by the old house listing on a real estate site. It was a fluke. A late-night scroll. One of those "what would I do with $200,000 in the middle of nowhere" moments. There it was. 219 Appleton Lane. Still listed. The description was sterile, but I could read between the lines. Charming family home with character. Needs repairs. Heating system not updated. Price negotiable. I stared at the pictures. The peeling paint on the front porch. The sagging window frames. The bare living room stripped of anything personal. Kitchen that used to smell like Mom's cinnamon rolls now looked cold, almost clinical. Empty counters. Dull tile. A hollow echo of something I used to love. I stared at the photo for a long time. And then I closed the tab. Not with a heavy heart. Just with clarity. Some things aren't worth going back for. Not because they weren't once beautiful, but because they were never meant to carry you forever. Late January. Snow still falling. Cold biting deeper. I started spending more time by the fireplace. Not because it was necessary, my little heater kept the place warm enough, but because it felt sacred. Like a ritual. The slow kind. A match strike. The glow building. Crackle of dry wood finally catching. I'd wrap myself in the thickest blanket I owned, sip tea, and watch the flames dance until they turned to embers. I started to think of it as a kind of prayer. Not to something outside myself. Just to the small part of me that had gone so long without being asked what it wanted. One night I wrote in my journal, "This is the fire I built for myself. This is the warmth I do not owe. This is the home that began with silence." And it is enough. February arrived without warning. Not with a storm, but a hush. The wind softened. The days lengthened just slightly. I could feel the shift, not in the weather but in myself. I no longer thought about Julia every night. No longer waited for Mom's messages to start again. No longer imagined reconciliation scenes in the old kitchen, everyone smiling like nothing happened. That fantasy had faded, quiet as snow melting on the roof. Instead, I thought about what I wanted next. Not in 5 years. Not in the big dramatic way people talk about dreams. Just tomorrow. I wanted to try baking again. Maybe pick up a side class in the spring. I wanted to see the lilac trees bloom near Riverfront Park. I wanted to laugh more. Even if only at myself. Even if only when no one else was around. By mid-February, I ran into Joe at the bookstore. "You look different," he said. "Colder?" I asked, smirking. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Brighter." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled. He handed me a slim novel. No title on the front. Just a worn navy cover and gold lettering down the spine. "It's about a woman who disappears from her family and becomes her own story," he said. "Sounds familiar," I said, and added it to my stack. That night, I lit the fire early. The city outside was quiet again, blanketed and still. The roads were slick. Trees bowed with snow. And yet the inside of my apartment pulsed with warmth. I made a small dinner. Rice and lentils. Simple. Satisfying. I curled up on the couch with the navy book and let the pages take me. And when I paused to sip my tea, I thought, not about Julia or Mom or the thermostat at 219 Appleton Lane, but about how far I had come. Not in miles. In silence. In choosing not to explain. In choosing not to pay for a seat at a table where I'd been uninvited. There's a photo I keep in the drawer by my bed. It's from years ago. Thanksgiving. I'm younger, holding a pie I baked myself. Julia's leaning against the counter, phone in hand, not looking at me. Mom's smiling but distracted. Dad's reading something off a paper. I'm the only one looking into the camera. I don't look sad. But I look like someone trying. Trying to fit in. Trying to matter. Trying not to take up too much space. I look at that photo now and feel something between tenderness and grief. Not for them. For me. For the girl who thought being useful was the same as being loved. I folded the photo back into the drawer. Not with anger. Just finality. The snow will come again. It always does. And I will wrap myself in the rust-colored scarf I knit with my own hands. I will drink tea steeped in cardamom and honey. I will sit by the fire I lit without help, without permission. And I will remember. I am not cruel for choosing peace. I am not heartless for setting boundaries. I am not wrong for no longer shivering so someone else can feel comfortable. The fire crackled in agreement as I reached for my tea, steam rising gently, blurring the edges of everything except the truth. Winter would last. Snow would fall. But I had chosen warmth that wasn't borrowed. And I didn't regret a single thing.